because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with the promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that come from the Lord.
Happy Father's Day. Today I wear one of my daddest shirts that I have. That's too much bacon, said no one ever. Yeah, this might be a short sermon today because I can smell the bacon already, so we might be out of here soon. So lots of reasons to praise God today. Okay, so it's Father's Day. Let's talk about dads. Sound good? We live in a very divided culture, right? They want to divide people along every possible line. Age, gender, race, and especially gender again. It's crazy seeing kind of the extremes of both sides. On the male side, you have this thing called MGTOW. Yeah, MGTOW, that's what it's called, MCTOW. Have you guys heard of this? It's called Men Go Their Own Way. And it's this movement among men who are kind of disenfranchised and disillusioned. And it's basically, we don't need women anymore. Men are going to go their own way instead. I mean, think about it. If both people forget an anniversary, who's in trouble? Right? If both people forget Valentine's Day, who's in trouble? And with the way culture is, with the way women are today, it's just better if you just don't bother. Just have a string of shallow relationships when you want to have fun, but don't have a family, don't settle down, don't get a wife above everything, because you know how they treat you in custody courts and in divorce courts. You lose everything. And there's this whole corner of the manosphere right now where men are divided from women, and they're thinking if we just go our own way and we watch out for ourselves, that's the way to go, right? That is stupid. But on the other side, we have that as well. We have women saying, we don't need no man, right? And I've read art for doing research on this sermon this week. You kind of see it a lot in pop culture anyway. Like when you have any sitcom, it's the husband who's kind of the bubbling idiot, and the wife's the intelligent one. You know, the dad's kind of worthless with the kids. You read on literature, and you hear about the patriarchy and how terrible that is. And there's this movement of women who also feel like, well, we don't need a man at all. And society's not set up for women. It's unfair to women. There's the wage gap. There's barely any women who are leading companies. And it's not men go their own way. It's like women go their own way. It's the opposite side. That is also dumb. Right? That's why on Mother's Day, I take a day and I praise moms and women. And that's why on Father's Day, I take a day to praise men. As a man, I'm going to say we especially need men to step up in this generation. We especially need men to step up in this generation because we do have a world that is trying to divide us along gender, but they also are largely trying to marginalize men. Some could call it a war on men and masculinity. You know, from the time, well, that's not part of my sermon. Briefly, from the time children are young, we are marginalizing boyhood more and more and more and more. Boys are required to sit still longer, to concentrate more. That's not my sermon, but trust me, that's happening. I won't get into it. But, and in the church, this is also a problem. Many churches lack masculinity. I'm not saying we're too feminine, because the feminine is good, right? But we need the masculine as well. And a lot of churches are too feminine. And there's books that have been written on this. I won't break it down. But this is one of the few churches I've ever been in where the men's ministry is as strong or stronger than the women's ministry. I've had a handful of ladies come to me in this church and complain, you know, there's men's groups all over the place. There's always men getting together, but there's not that many women's groups. And part of me's like, yeah, we should fix that. And part of me's like, that's right. We got men in this church. And we got men who get together and we talk about things and we pray for each other and we make battle plans and then we go change the world and make things awesome. Like that's what church men should be. And what the world wants to do is they want to marginalize men and they want to say, hey, it's better if you're soft all the time. It's better if you're quiet all the time. It's better if you're weak all the time. Today, I want to give you permission to be loud and go break stuff. Okay? That's why we're going to eat bacon, which I don't know if you guys know the science, but it's good for your heart. So it's a heart-healthy food. And we're going to eat maple bars, and we're going to drink root beer because we're Christian. I didn't know what manhood was growing up because I didn't grow up with a father. You know, my dad took off when I was 5. And so I didn't really know what manhood was. I had some other men in my life that helped me, but I just had a distrust of adults in general, but men in particular. And so when I became a Christian, when I was around 20 years old, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't have these verses here that said this is what a man should be. And then I always knew I wanted a family, though. And so I met this fine Latina here in Spokane. We started dating, and I'm like, we're probably going to get married. After that, I want kids, and I have no idea what I'm doing as a husband or a father. And thankfully, these verses give us some indication of what things should be like. Right before the passage that was read to us today, it talks about how men should treat their wives as well. Let me tell you what the family structure was like in Jesus' day, because it was very different than ours. In the ancient world, most people lived in a house called an insula. Can you say that? Insula. Insula, yeah. Some rich people lived in a building called a domus. Can you say domus? Domus. And that's where we get the word domicile. Now, a domus is a big house. It has a bunch of rooms. It's fancy. An insula is more like an apartment where the bottom floor is the shop or the business, and above it is a little loft where the family lives. And most families in the ancient world lived in a space that was about the size of a one-car garage. And the ancient household was much different than today's household. We have what you call the nuclear family. There's mom, dad, the kids, right? In the ancient world, the family was bigger. They called it the household, the koine. That was bigger. Or the oikos, that was bigger. And so it included mom, dad, the kids. It included any adopted kids, which was super common in the ancient times. It included slaves. It included servants who lived there. It included in-laws. But all those people were part of the primary family. And privacy wasn't really a thing in a lot of the homes in the ancient world. And you know what they called these households in the ancient world? They didn't call it the nuclear family. They called it the pater familias. Pater is the word for father. And so what this tells you, and what we know from the ancient world, is that the man of the house ruled over all. Just absolute rule. Here's an example. A child didn't become a legal child of the father until the father acknowledged the child. So even biological children, if you decided you didn't want that one, you could expose it out to the elements and decide you didn't want it to be your kid, and you could take an adopted kid as your heir instead. And for all intents and purposes, then that kid doesn't have a father. So you want to talk about patriarchy. Like, the man was the absolute head of the house, and what he said went, and that was kind of the structure. So when Paul comes in with this letter, Paul, who, by the way, was single, but he worked with families a lot, he came in and he said, okay, look, fathers, when you relate to your kids, you shouldn't be like a tyrant. And the reason he said that is because it was so easy to be a tyrant when you were the man of the house in the ancient world, because you ruled over everything. And that's why I said, okay, look, be considerate of your wives, in Peter, and then here in Ephesians he says, love your wives like Christ loved the church. So the idea that the man of the house wasn't just supposed to acquire honor or glory or a good reputation for his family, but that as a Christian father and husband, he was supposed to nurture his children. He was supposed to nurture his wife. He was supposed to nurture his family. So here's kind of the idea. You can imagine your family as a garden, and your children and your wife and the people in your family as plants. And you want to nurture those plants so they flourish and so they do well. And we know what it looks like when a human does well, don't we? I don't have to lay it out. And we know what it looks like when a human does not do well, when they're struggling, when they're kind of losing at life. We know what that looks like. You're supposed to be the kind of man in the house that is going to encourage good things, a good life, and nurture. And what I love about these verses is they give us that picture of what it means to be a Christian father and husband. Especially for people like me that didn't grow up with a father. Like, we need as many examples as we can get, right? And as much teaching as we can get. So what kind of a man is able to nurture his family and care for his family? Here's what I want to do the rest of the day. I want to talk about how to be an awesome man. I want to praise awesome men. And then I want to eat bacon. That's like my plan the whole day. You guys with me? Okay, so what makes an awesome man? First of all, although culture is waging war on manhood, we have to realize, as Ephesians teaches us, that the war isn't with flesh and blood, right? We're not battling just the policies. We're not battling just the sitcoms or the commercials or the messages. We're not battling the posts and the feeds and the bots or whatever. It's a spiritual battle. And so if we're going to show the world what godly manhood looks like, we need to be spiritual men. We need to be men who pray, men who have faith, men who are connected to God, especially because God is the Father. God is the true Father, and he's the one we should be connected to. So when it says for us to love our wives and to nurture them and to nurture our children and not provoke them to become permanently bitter because we're just so harsh on them, we can look at the cross and think about Jesus, and that gives us a good idea of what that could look like. So when Jesus went to the cross, he died on the cross to bring those who were far away from God close to him. And there's many images of this in the Bible. There's an image of somebody who is going to prison, being freed from prison and not having to go anymore. People who are being oppressed by spiritual power, no longer being oppressed by that spiritual power. That Jesus' death on the cross also made people who were enemies of God, made them friends of God. There's also images of somebody who was far away from God, being close to God, somebody who was dead, coming back to life. But there's another image, and it's the image that when you come to faith in Jesus, you have this right, this new inheritance to be called a child of God. And there's this conversation even in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5, that you're now adopted into the family of God, and that God becomes your father. And so the first thing you need to do to be a good father is to be a good son to God the Father. And Jesus' death on the cross brought us back to God. And some of us, we like to focus on one image or another of what Jesus' work did. But it was so deep that all the images have to bear out our lives. And one of these images that has always been hard for me to think of, frankly, is that I'm a child of God. Because I felt abandoned by my parents. So for me, being a child didn't seem like I had a good benefit. Well, I've been a Christian now for what? 29 years? Something like that. I'll be 90 in May. So I've been a Christian a long time now, and I can tell you being a child of God makes a difference. It makes a difference. A while ago, I had a martial arts school in Hilliard, a long time ago. And a lot of the guys who would come in and train were angry young men. We call them at-risk youth. A lot of them were fatherless guys, very aggressive, very comfortable with violence. They came to me to learn how to be violent better, you know what I mean? And they would come to the gym, and we built a brotherhood in that gym. And we learned about what it meant to be not just a martial person, but also an artist and a good person in that gym. And we learned about manhood in that gym. So it's a spiritual perspective we need to take. That if you're going to be a strong father, you're going to be a good father, that you need to be a spiritual father. You need to be a spiritual person. Which means you can't live in the flesh all the time. What is the flesh? The flesh is how the world has basically programmed you to be. That's the flesh. The way the world made you. You need to choose to become something else consciously. You need to choose to follow Jesus and to follow God consciously and to become something different than what the world wants you to be. Because the world wants you to be subdued, quiet, and weak, and nervous about how your wife feels all the time. Really, one big current in pop culture thinking now is a good husband is the kind of husband that is able to manage his wife's moods all the time, so she's constantly in a happy, cheerful, pleasant mood. And a lot of you men, you organize your lives in ways to where you're trying to manage your wife's moods so that she'll always be in a good emotional place. But when you're a husband who's reactive like that and you're operating out of fear because you don't want to get emotionally punished because you're scared of disappointing your wife, can you lead? No. And they might not say it, but most women don't want a nervous little cowering man who's trying to guess at what they want. What they want is a strong man who can protect and provide and make decisions and lead and care for and carry a lot of the burden with them or take some burdens from them. These are all metaphors. Some of them aren't. Figure it out. But they want a man. They want a man, if someone breaks into the house, you can break the person who broke into your house, right? They want a man who knows as they send their children out, who they want to love and protect, as they send them out into this dangerous world, that there's something more dangerous behind the kid than there is in front of them. That they want someone who's strong, someone who knows how to pray and forgive and care. And some of us, we've bought into this cultural lie that happy wife means a happy life. You guys realize we need each other, right? You know what? I was talking to Lily about this before church, and she said, "Are you going to talk about the sermon today?" I said, "No." And it turns out I lied because I want to bring it up. Have you guys heard of luxury beliefs? Okay, this is a great concept. It's a psychological concept. A luxury belief is a belief you don't hold because it's true, but you hold because it's helpful to you, and you can only hold it because of your luxurious lifestyle. Here's an example. I'm going to get a little political, but I'm going to get bacon soon, so I don't really care. Here's an example. Defund the police. That's not controversial anymore, right? It's kind of past. So let me talk about defund the police. Defund the police was an idea that was primarily put forward by people who had the privilege to talk about it. So this is just an illustration of what a luxury belief is, okay? I'm not saying whether defund the police is good or bad or not. It's bad. But I just want to use this as an example for a luxury belief. So a luxury belief is when you have a bunch of people in a social class who are in comfort and they're insulated from the consequences of what they believe. So the reason why they believe some of the things they believe isn't because they're true, it's because it signals to other people in their people group that they're on the same page. So they believe things not because they're true, but because it helps them be well-liked and get status in their people group. Okay, everybody does this. Do you guys know humans are not truth-seeking animals? You know this, right? Like, we're full of it. But this is one of the ways this plays out. So luxury belief is when you believe that something not because it's true, but because it gives you status with other people. So I knew people who would get together and say defund the police and high-five each other, and they all talked about how they would change the world because they were angry and typing in chat rooms. Right? So defund the police was a luxury belief that was a slogan that helped them know that they were on the same team, and it helped them encourage each other and have status with each other. Now, as upper class people who didn't live in the hood and didn't need the police that much, it was convenient to hold this belief that you could defund them. But what we found is where people had power to actually defund the police, did it help the people who actually needed the cops? People who were in poor neighborhoods, they didn't like not having cops around because cops are good when people are trying to murder you or take your stuff. So they had a belief that was a luxury for them to have, but it was the privilege that allowed them to have it, and it had consequences for people who didn't have the privilege to have that belief. Like, if you grow up around a bunch of gangbangers, I promise you, you're not thinking about defunding the police. You know who's happy about that? The gangsters. Like, yeah, let's do it, right? But nobody else. So that's an example. There's lots of examples of luxury beliefs. Okay, that's a bonus part of the sermon. Thinking we don't need each other is a luxury belief. It's only in a world After it has been built and all the roads are there and all the safety is there and all the law and order is there and everybody is protected and opportunities are available, that's the only kind of world where a man can say, I'm going to go my own way, we don't need women, and women can say, we don't need no man. You know what world those beliefs never existed in? The world of the Dust Bowl. I just read a book about this. There was this gal, she went through high school, this is in the 30s. If you don't know what the Dust Bowl is, in the 20s and 30s, they over-farmed in a bunch of states, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and other places. They over-farmed the grasslands, and so it eroded all the topsoil so they couldn't farm anymore. And so they cashed in on a lot of wheat, and then everybody went broke, and it was just a real terrible time for people. And there was a drought at the same time. There was this one gal, she went through high school, and then she became a teacher at a high school. 39 students in the high school, K through 12, one-room classroom. She had to ride her horse to work every day 5 miles. After she got there, she had to sweep all the dust out of the school, shoo all the insects out, then fetch water for the day because there was no running water in the building. Then after she taught these 39 kids by herself all day, she would ride her horse home. And she had a tent 5 miles home. And her home was a dugout, which is basically a cave, a cave with log supports dug out into the side of a hill. She had no electricity. She had no running water in her house. And at the time she was teaching the school, she was 17 years old. How many luxury beliefs do you think she held? I mean, really, did she have time to think, I don't need no man, or defund the police, or whatever the luxury belief of the time is? You know what a luxury belief is? I just thought of this. It's a pug. It's a pug. Do you know the history of pugs? Pugs were bred in China, and they're worthless little wrinkly snorty dogs that can do nothing. They can't do anything. All they can do is look cute. And it's weird how they look cute, too. It's because they're a dog that's so ugly, they became cute again. You know, it's like they flipped the odometer or something. And it's just so ugly, it's cute now. And it's just kind of God's joke. So people don't have pugs for any other purpose except in ancient Chinese society to show you that they could afford a pug. That's the only reason pugs exist. Luxury beliefs are pugs, right? And this idea that we don't need each other, that's a luxury belief. Men, do we need women? Yes. Women, do we need men? Yes. So get a man, get a woman, pop out kids, have a family, learn responsibility, build up a life. Do it. Okay, back to men now. You see how the world is being overrun with luxury beliefs, though? Because we have unprecedented wealth and unprecedented in this wealth and this comfort in this world, so we're able to become so detached from a reality we can believe as silly things as we want. I mean, you telling me there's not a lot of ridiculous beliefs that have gotten popular in the last few years? You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'm talking about gender, right? There's male and female. And it's mostly based on innie or outie, right? Like, it's not that complicated. People knew this forever. But people are so divorced from reality, we can believe all of these ridiculous things because we're overrun with luxury beliefs. What Christians need to do is we need to live in the real world. And we need to live by the truth. And so, men, the scripture tells you it is good to be as strong and as powerful as possible and as competent as possible so that you can build a life to where you can nurture the people whom God has entrusted to you. That is good. And it's good to take your place leading. It's good to take your place caring and providing and being considerate and nurturing. And you know, it's actually not that complicated in a sense. You can become angry and insist on being right, or you can listen to what your kid is saying so you know where they're at, so you know how to pastor them from that point on. All right? You can keep looking at your phone, or you can put it down and look in the eyes of your spouse and hear what they're saying and then respond accordingly. Like, you choose the way you exist. And the way we need to exist is for the blessing and benefit of our wives and our children. Like our wife. Nah, we're not Mormon, right? Just one. I'm feeling a little sassy today. Okay. We've run the experiment, and we know what becomes of a society where fatherhood is not valued. We know what happens to parts of our culture where fathers disappear. We know that on every single metric that exists, fatherlessness is bad for children. It's just down to, do you guys know what telomeres are? Okay, Google it or grok it or whatever you use for your search now. The telomeres of 12-year-old girls who without fathers were shorter than the telomeres of girls with fathers. Isn't that crazy? You wouldn't think it would affect something as basically biological as that, but it absolutely does. And on every metric after the fact, not just biologically, but performance in school and life, I'm not saying if you're fatherless, you can't be successful. I grew up without a dad, and I'm kind of awesome, right? We can do it, but it's God's grace that does it. And what I'm saying is life is better with fathers, and life is better with good fathers. And you want to be a good father. You want to be a good husband, because the world needs good fathers. The world needs good husbands. The world does not know what that is right now. And we need to be willing to live in a way that contradicts what the world says a good man is, so that we can be actually good men. I'm about done here. Let me give you 4 applications real quick as we get out of here, okay? Let's read the passage. Starting in verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So there's 2 things in this passage. One is don't provoke your children to anger. That doesn't mean never make your kids upset. Good luck if that was the rule. Good luck with that one. It means you don't want to put your kids in a permanent state of bitterness, which you can do. Like if you're always too hard on your kids, or if you're never there for them at all. It's kind of one of those 2 balances. You want to balance care and control. Too much control with not enough care, you're like a drill sergeant, and that can really make kids bitter. Too much care and not enough control, and you're like a pal and a buddy, and they feel abandoned because you weren't a parent and you didn't lead them in life when they needed direction. Because kids are dumb and they need direction. Agreed? Okay, they know that too. And so they need you to be a parent. Even after they're adults, they need that help. When they're adolescents, they really need you there. You think they're fighting you every way. Yes, so what? You remember when you were that age. Just count it as karma and take it on the chin. But be there for the kids because they need it. They're still dumb when they're adolescents, right? I think they get dumber. So the first aspect is you want to not exasperate your children. You don't want to make them permanently bitter by being too absent or too controlling. You got to balance the care and control. But the other thing is you really want to bring them up in the discipline of the Lord. I'm glad you have a close family. I'm glad you have a happy family. I also want you to have a godly family. You want children who know Jesus. And there's 2 things that's going to help them know Jesus, just from pastoral experience. One is, do they like you? Do they like you? If they like you, they'll tend to like your God. Okay? That doesn't mean you live in a way to where your kids like you because you're their buddy. I already said that, right? But eventually, that's a big factor. And the other factor is, do they see you being a Christian outside of Sunday morning? I tell you, nothing else is a better testimony than consistency. This goes for your non-believing friends. It goes for your children. It goes for everybody. I talked to a guy once who told me he was leaving the faith. So, you're just walking away from Jesus? He said, yeah. I go, man, that's a big decision. He grew up in church, faithful church attender. He went to private Christian school in this area. I said, wow, so that's a big decision. Why the big change? He goes, honestly, my wife is super involved in church, and she grew up a Christian, and she's just so mean. Like, she hates me. And if Jesus doesn't work for her as much as religious she is, I don't think he's going to work for anybody. And so the wife became a testimony of deconversion for this guy, and that's why he ended up walking away from the Lord. Pray for him. We're trying to get him back. But you want consistency in your Christian life. You want consistent testimony. Okay, let's jump down to verse 10. It says, the final word, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you'll be able to stand firm against all the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. Therefore, it talks about putting on all the armor of God. And then down in verse 18, it says, pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. I love that. Pray in the Spirit. What's the difference between praying in the Spirit and praying out of the Spirit? We just think, well, we're praying, so that's good, right? We didn't know there was a difference. Well, I bet you if you stop and think about it, you can tell the difference between when you're praying in your spirit versus when you're praying in the Spirit. I think you know. If you just sit with it for a second, you would understand. So next time you go to pray, don't make it in the flesh word reaction. You want to pray in the Spirit. So, nurture your kids, don't provoke them, lead spiritually, model faith to your kids, and then pray relentlessly in the Spirit. Two more things. One is you don't have to be a manly man to be a godly man. Okay, I like fighting and motorcycles, consensual Christian fighting, and motorcycles and stuff, but that doesn't mean you have to do that to be a Christian man. Like some people have more culturally masculine tastes, some people don't. It doesn't matter. But the idea of being strong in the Lord, of having faith, of following Jesus and being a good son to the Father, and then nurturing your wife, nurturing your children, and being strong and competent enough to lead, those are things that don't adhere to culture or taste. Those are for all of you. And so if all of you are the same husband this year, okay, let me say that again. If all of you are the same husband this year as you were last year and you haven't grown, that's a problem. Right? Huh? Okay. If you have the same skill as a parent this year as you did last year, that's a problem. If I practiced guitar for a year, do you think I'd be better after a year? Yeah, you should be a better husband and father after years and years and years. You should just keep getting better. And then it's perfect when you're a grandfather because you can be the perfect parent, and then when the kid annoys you, you can just give him back and leave. It's like the perfect situation. But just because and here's the other thing, just because you're supposed to be a strong man doesn't mean you're supposed to be an invincible man. Like you'll have seasons of weakness. You'll get injured. You might get depressed. Whatever it is, your capacities will diminish at certain times in your life for whatever reason. That's okay. Like you have permission to be human. During those times, you want to stay close to the Lord, walk in faith, and you want to demonstrate resilience for other men. You want to surround yourself with strong men so you can depend on their strength. And you want to be able to depend on your wife and your family as you need them. Like we're supposed to be stronger together, right? We need each other. I keep saying that. So you'll have seasons of weakness as men, but two things. One, and I'm going to be very blunt, do not hurt yourself. Don't do it. I know you get in dark places sometimes where it seems like it'd be better just to escape or like people would be better off without you. I promise you that is not the case. And it is such a final act and such a final decision. If you could just wait a day. You can always do it tomorrow, right? Just wait a day and then wait another day. And do whatever you can to tend to your health so that you're not thinking in so destructive ways. Sometimes the world's not saying it. Sometimes you're not hearing it. But I want you to know the world needs you. Not just men in general, the world needs you. God chose your time and your place so that you could exist for a specific reason. So you need to stay around. No matter what the cost is. I mean, you need to persevere and stay around. So when you get in those dark places, man, depend on people, reach out, do the last thing you want to do, which is connect with other people. And talk about what's going on inside. You should have other men in your life who can help you carry heavy things. That's my timer saying my sermon is over. Man, I am so grateful for you, and the church is grateful for you. And I'm sorry that the world is against you, and they're telling you all kinds of things that you're supposed to be that you're not. But I'll tell you, God has a plan for you. He has a purpose for you. And if man would stand up and take their rightful, strong, competent space in this culture, the world would change. And I'm telling you, it's not manly to stand by and whine about why the world's broken. What's manly is to get up and fix it, right? So men of the church, I'm so grateful you exist. I'm so grateful God put you in my church. And I'm glad that Timberview has a church of masculinity and manliness, but it needs to be connected not to the culture, but to Christ. And the more you surrender, the more you follow, the more holy you become, the more filled with love you become, the more manly you'll become. The more like Jesus you become, the more manly you'll become. The world needs us. The world needs you. And I hope you get spoiled today if you're a father, because you absolutely deserve it. Okay, men get extra bacon today. And wives, you can't say anything about it. Men, if your wives nag you about how much bacon you eat, tell me and I'll get them in trouble with God next week. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I pray that you would infuse the men in this church with a sense of worth, a sense of importance, and a sense of your love for them. I pray that you would give us grace when we fall short, but also give us a continual burning desire to be holy men, set apart from sin, set apart from the ways of the world, but conform to the image of your Son. Lord, nurturing our children, nurturing our wife, nurturing our families, building this world up and making it stronger. And Lord, help us to depend and lean on other people when we need it in seasons of weakness. Lord, thank you for making us to be together and to need each other. But I pray for not just Timberview, but for the church around the world, that you would continue to raise up godly men, so that as the men of this world shrink back, there will be protectors and strong men to take their place.